All right, everyone, and welcome back to the Sports Zone. I'm Cameron Hammond. Thanks for being here with us, where we talk about what's going on in the world of sports. Today, we're going to focus on a film review entitled Moneyball. I'm sure many of you have heard of Moneyball. It was originally written as a book by Michael Lewis about the Oakland A's manager Billy Beane and his philosophy on how to win an unfair game. But before we begin, I must give a quick disclaimer. I am a huge baseball fan. I admire Billy Beane. So when I saw this movie, I tried to look at it from an unbiased perspective. And here are some of my thoughts on what I feel the movie is like. And I'm also going to compare what a couple well-known movie critics have said about Moneyball. So let's get started. For those of you who aren't familiar with Moneyball, here's a little bit of a brief background. Moneyball is about Billy Beane, who is the general manager of the Oakland A's, and he's faced with the tough task of building a World Series caliber ball club. Unfortunately, Oakland is a small market team, and they have a hard time competing with the big spenders like the Yankees and the Red Sox. And so, after losing the previous year in the playoffs, the good players who play for the Oakland A's decide to leave and join teams like the Red Sox and give them a lot more money. And so that leaves Billy with a big gap to fill, and he's not sure how exactly to do that. But without giving too much away, Billy decides to work with what he's got, and he puts together a winning team with the small amount of money that he has. So it's a story about him and what he does to build his baseball club. So it is about sports. There is a business side to it, and that's what I really appreciated about the movie, was the business aspect of it. And that's what Roger Ebert thought of as well. Ebert goes on to talk about how, Brad Pitt, who plays Billy Beane, doesn't have a major role in the film. The players don't have a major role in the film. The film is really about what's going on inside the mind of Billy Beane, and so talks about how relationships aren't really formed that strong, and we don't really get to know too much about who the man Billy Beane really is, but more so what's going on in his mind. And I thought that was a great point, and I agree with that, because it was kind of hard to connect with the characters in the film. You have Billy, you have his assistant, Peter Brand, and they have a relationship, but they don't really connect on too personal of a level. And so, as a viewer, it was hard to connect with them, but it was fascinating how they portrayed the mind of Billy Beane and what exactly was going on in his head. And that's what I felt was the most interesting part of the movie. Ebert further goes on to talk about the feel of the movie, and he describes it as a melancholy movie. And he states that the movie, there aren't too many highs, there aren't too many lows, there are some exciting points, but overall the movie has a melancholy feel to it. And that's where I would agree with Ebert for the most part. There was a really exciting point in the movie where the A's win 20 straight games, which is a record. And as a baseball fan, I was really excited during that point. But overall, I would agree with Ebert that it definitely does have a different feel to it. But it's a feeling that I think is interesting. It's not portrayed too much in movies, and so I was able to connect with it pretty well, I believe. But Ebert summed it up at the end of his review. He said that, if you're a baseball fan, you're going to love it. If you're not a baseball fan, you probably won't. And I've talked with people who've seen it who aren't baseball fans, and they thought it was pretty slow, pretty boring. But as a fan, I definitely really connected with it. It really put into perspective how hard it is to win a game that's set up against your odds. And that's what Billy Beane does, and that's the whole purpose of the movie. So I really enjoyed taking a look at Ebert's review of Moneyball, and I feel he made some pretty good points. Next up, I want to take a look at a film critic named Scott Mendelson and what he thought about Moneyball. Mendelson writes for the Huffington Post. He gave a pretty detailed review of what he thought.
I think one of the main points that Mendelsohn tries to make with his review of Moneyball is its failure to connect with the audience, and its failure to connect with the female audience, which, you know, I could see. Billy Bean's played by Brad Pitt, and so I think that alone would probably drive the women to the theater, but I guess I can see the other hand as well, because it is kind of a slower paced movie. There's not a whole lot of action, and it's about baseball. And so whether or not, you know, Moneyball connects with the female audience, that's debatable. But at the end of his review, Mendelsohn, I think, makes a really good point where he says that with what Moneyball was trying to accomplish, that it did a great job. He didn't call it a grand slam, but he said it does do the job, and he gives it some praise. I would disagree with that slightly. I do believe that the Moneyball's audience was definitely geared towards more of a niche audience, and that it didn't say it's as mainstream as maybe some other films. But in the baseball world, compared to all of the other baseball films, I would say that Moneyball is in fact a grand slam. It's one of the best films made, because it really gives us an inside look as to what goes on behind the game of baseball, which I really appreciated. And so that's what Scott Mendelsohn had to say, along with Roger Ebert. Both gave great reviews. And so that is our detailed review of Moneyball. So if you're going to go check it out. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Sportszone with Cameron and Hammond. Join us next time as we talk about what's going on